sure the Fijian
is late. Yep, but I don't have to say anything about that because
Okay.
Hart will do that.
Okay, good. Should we call to order, or do you want
That's
to do
what
that?
Doreen said. Yeah, that's okay. Good afternoon. We're just gonna let everybody get comfortable. We have a wonderful couple of hours ahead of us this afternoon, and we're all eager to get started. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Christine Hogan, and I am the Executive Director on the board at the World Bank representing Canada, Ireland, and the Caribbean. And it really gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you today to this Small States Engagement Update. I have been invited and graciously accepted to serve as your moderator for the event today. And we're going to start shortly with a number of very interesting remarks. But before I hand it over to Hart Schaefer, who many of you I hope know well, he's the Vice President for OPCS. And for those of you who are new to the World Bank or don't like acronyms, he's the Vice President for Operational Policy and Country Services at the World Bank. I just wanted to give you a bit of a sense of how things are going to roll out this afternoon. We've organized ourselves into two parts to the discussion. Firstly, once Hart has a chance to introduce folks, we're going to hear from our very distinguished guest, Prime Minister Keith Mitchell. He is going to present to us his vision for the Small States Forum going forward, given his new role as the chair of the Small States Forum. And then we're going to have a panel, have the World Bank Group Small States Coordinator is going to come and take us through the draft roadmap that the World Bank has been working on in terms of how to take the Small States agenda forward. That will be followed by panel members who will react to the presentations, and then I have the great fortune of helping to try to moderate a bit of a conversation between the panelists and our audience. I just want to remind all of you that might not be aware, the event today is being live streamed, so look good and keep smiling. And with those very brief introductory remarks, I am very pleased to hand it over to Hart Schaefer to kick off the event and introduce our very distinguished keynote speaker. Hart.
Thank you very much, Christine. Good afternoon. Small states, large crowds, huge interest. It's fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. A special warm welcome to Prime Minister Keith Mitchell from Grenada, the chair of the Small States Forum. We'd also like to welcome the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Chastanet. Various ministers that I've worked with previously in the bank. I'm delighted to see you here. Colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this event of the Small States Forum to talk about the progress that we have made since we came from Lima to the annual meetings last year, and as we are heading to the annual meetings this fall. We have come a long way. In Lima, we committed to doing a stock-taking exercise, how we, the World Bank, can support small states, can address the particular challenges, but also help small states exploit the enormous opportunities that are there. Back in the fall, during the annual meetings, we presented the stock-taking exercise. This was endorsed, and then we committed to doing a roadmap. And we would like to present to you today this roadmap that moves us from diagnostics to actions, to very concrete actions of what the World Bank can do. And I'm very delighted that we have a panel of experts who will be available today. We are expecting still the Minister of Finance from Fiji to arrive, but we have my fellow Vice President Victoria Kwakwa, the Vice President of East Asia and the Pacific region here. We have Lisa Finneran, the Director for Development Finance in the World Bank here. She was responsible for the IDA 18 increase and is now also looking at IDA and IBRD. And then we welcome Heidi Schroederus-Fox, the acting High Representatives from the UN Office of Landlocked Small Countries. It's great to be here and to present to you and hear your views and get your input in this roadmap that will identify very concrete actions that we can take on your behalf and support your development plans. When we left in October last year, we had an action plan of 7 actions. We have put those actions into 3 buckets. The first bucket is concessional finance, ensuring that small states have access, reliable access, predictable access to concessional finance. The second bucket is what can we do to attract more private sector finance for diversification and for spurring growth and job development in small states. And the third bucket has to do with capacity building. In many of the small states, we are dealing with weak institutional capacity, with limited institutional and manpower, and we need to do more from the bank side, both in terms of helping with capacity building, but also being more flexible with regard to our own rules and regulations when small states are accessing our finance. This roadmap is going to be a framework, but we're also going to share that with other partners. And I'm very delighted that we are working closely with the UN family, with OECD, with the IMF, with the Commonwealth Secretariat and others in taking that agenda forward, because if we join voices, if we join our efforts, then the 50 small states that are part of the Small States Forum will make out quite a large number of our constituencies. With those words, I wish us productive, fruitful, and constructive dialogue. Doreen Kibuka will be presenting us with the main features of the roadmap, and then I'm pleased that we will hear from, I think we'll hear from the Prime Minister first, and then we'll do the presentation. So, Your Excellency, Prime Minister Mitchell, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hart. Thank you, my colleague, Prime Minister Chastity, all of other distinguished ministers of government who are here with us, governors, vice presidents, executive directors, and directors of the World Bank, and distinguished panelists, my sisters and brothers, all. I first want to express my deepest thanks and appreciation to my CARICOM colleagues for the support for Grenada as chair of this distinguished body. I also like to express my thanks to the Seychelles as the outgoing chair. Together with the World Bank Vice President Hart Schaefer and his team, we believe that they did an extensive job in laying the foundation for a new and reinvigorated Small States Forum. The bank's Taking Stock report has laid the basis for a roadmap that would help to build the forum year after year. I was delighted to welcome the Executive Director, Christine, and Vice President Hart and their team to Grenada recently. The visit was a further expression of the solid commitment of the World Bank to achieving concrete results on this extremely important issue. And in my discussion then, and discussions yesterday with the World Bank President, Dr. Jim King, he expressed his steadfast support for the Small States Forum. To me, it was a very interesting session that I had with him because I could feel the passion and his clear interest in this very important issue. I believe that we clearly have to change the narrative. In doing so, we have to deliver concrete results. We need to have a new narrative where small size is not seen as a disadvantage, but as a distinct advantage. For example, it is well known that Singapore, Iceland, and Mauritius have already distinguished themselves as small, successful economies. 2, 2015 was a watershed year. The Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals have shifted the world's trajectory. 3, small states can be at the vanguard as a petri dishes for this new development approach. 4, we do not come to the table cap in hand. We come with something valuable to offer. Small is nimble, quick, and cost-effective. So, let's look at specific opportunities. 1, there are a number of specific opportunities I would like to highlight, namely the blue economy, renewable energy, and technology. I think we all understand the critical importance of these issues. 2, the blue economy. Starting with the blue economy, some islands have as much as 1,000 times more space at sea than they do on land. They have been at the forefront of the SDG 14 on oceans. One of the targets is to ensure that more economic benefits go to those islands. In the Pacific, they have created the OPEC of tuna fisheries. Moreover, the Pacific Possible Initiative seeks new opportunities beyond the fisheries. In the Caribbean, our coastal resources have become the main engines of our economies. A new World Bank study recently values the Caribbean blue economy at $409 billion. The African islands are also pioneers. Seychelles recently completed the world's first marine debt for nature swap. Others are following, and there are enormous innovations on stream. Blue development policy loans, blue insurance, blue bonds, a blue innovative institute, and a blue university are all areas. From the Atlantic to the Pacific and from the Indian Ocean to the Caribbean Sea, islands are leading on the blue economy. Renewable energy. Compared to large development economies, the Caribbean is paying 200 to 500% more for electricity. That sounds startling, eh? Mm-hmm. Well, it's worse in Grenada. In remote islands in the Pacific, it can be as high as 1,000% more. But we can deliver geothermal energy, solar energy, and wind energy at much cheaper rate. Small states can set an example for the rest of the world. We can make the renewable energy the de facto source of energy for ourselves by 2030, probably even earlier than that. Knowledge and technology. Generally speaking, small states compete less well on volume commodity products. That's well known. We need more, therefore, we need more high-value niche products and services. We need intensified value chain migration and concentric diversification, underpinned by knowledge and technology. That is the great equalizer. The fourth industrial revolution has received much attention from the World Economic Forum. With information and communications technology as its foundation, the revolution represents a low-hanging fruit for small states. The reality check. There are some of the possibilities, but we must do a reality check and acknowledge the challenges faced by small states. Many small states face the triple trap of climate impacts, high fossil fuel prices, and high levels of indebtedness. These factors limit fiscal space. They anchor economies on sinking sand in the face of rising seas. So I'd like to talk specifically about access to finance, capacity building, developing the Small States Forum into a platform for action. Access to finance. We can start with the access to predictable and affordable public sector finance. The 50% increase in IDA from 50 billion to 75 billion is a major opportunity for small states that are eligible for IDA. This comes at a very uncertain time for development finance and for climate finance. Therefore, by the time of the IDA 18 midterm review next year, it will be crucial to demonstrate some success. Towards this end, we propose that the small states IDA allocation be front-loaded and fast-tracked. This money should not be used for business-as-usual projects, but for strategic and transformational projects that can crowd in private sector investment. A small states fast-track facility could also help ensure that this happens. But as we are aware, not all small states are eligible for concessional finance. This is a travesty of justice in our opinion, given the vulnerability of small states for devastating external shocks, including climate change. So vulnerability must be one of the criteria for concessional financing. To be concrete, let us aim to mainstream vulnerability into lending consideration by October 2018. Also, too many small states have high debt to GDP ratios. Also, the Small States Forum could serve as a platform for accessing and blending finance from a range of sources. For example, concessional finance, climate finance, private sector funding, and also innovative instruments such as the debt for nature swap, green bonds, blue bonds, and so forth. Access to private sector funding and diversification. I want to switch to access public sector financing and accessing private sector finance. Challenges to private sector development are worsened by de-risking amongst correspondent banks. It's a very serious and vexing issue facing our small states. This undermines efforts to scale up financial inclusion. So the Small States Forum should be used as a platform, my brothers and sisters, to make representation to the U.S. Treasury and others for those who have heirs to hear. Last year, the IMF Managing Director, our sister, Christine Lagarde, suggested to the Caribbean governors that we might even consider blockchain technology to address de-risking. These technologies are not beyond us. In Barbados, there's already a blockchain technology company with major international backing. I make this point to encourage out-of-the-box thinking. We must therefore use this Small States Forum as a platform to innovative solutions. But even when we solve the risking, we are still faced with the ongoing issue of not enough risk capital for private sector expansion. Consider this. The intended National Determined Contributions INDCs for the seeds alone amount to around $15 billion. This portfolio has renewable energy programs. To meet the $15 billion challenge, we need to do a $1 billion PPP fund of funds for small and vulnerable states. The fund could be operationalized at $100 million. Two contributors could commit $12.5 million each to anchor the fund. The remainder can be raised from the private sector and other sources. The partnerships with others, our government is preparing a paper on innovative finance for small states, including the fund idea. We aim to circulate this paper in time for the annual meetings in October. Capacity and institutional building. Small states, as we all know, have limited capacity. Smart persons can do many jobs. We need ICT to simplify complex administrative processes. And we need more regional capacity housed in our own institutions. The development community, therefore, should bring their global knowledge to assist with these important efforts. Therefore, in conclusion, let me first state, we need to front load and fast track IDA resources to small states. I made this point. We need to launch a small states fast track facility. Not all small states are eligible for IDA. So by October 2018, let us aim to mainstream vulnerability into lending operations. We need a small states fund of funds for strategic and transformative PPP projects. And we need to make the Small States Forum a platform for partnerships, financing, and implementation. And also a platform for private sector engagement and to South-South learning. I would like to suggest that small states return in October with real, pre-cooked, and strategic projects that can be showcased and fast-tracked. Let us be clear. This cannot be business as usual. Now more than ever, it is vital to show the effectiveness of development financing. There's words, some serious actions. Small states, sisters and brothers, they are agile and they have a central role to play. These are messages that we must bring to the G20 and also to the World Economic Forum in January 2018. Governors, sisters and brothers all, I'm excited about the months ahead. Let us make the Small States platform a resounding success of concrete results. Let us make it an example for the entire world. And therefore, before I close, I just want a special thanks to my colleague, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who made it a very special visit, specifically, as he indicated to me, to be here with us, to join me in this important exercise. It's a clear demonstration of the level of importance that our regional governments place on this extremely important and vital issue. Thank you, and look forward to the rest of today's proceedings.
wants to introduce Doreen?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here, and I'm really very happy to have the opportunity to present to you the engagement update, the roadmap going forward that we have been working on over the last couple of months. First of all, let me thank Christine Hogan for her excellent leadership and guidance over the last few months as we've developed this roadmap, and the great support that Christine has provided to the Secretariat. Secondly, let me thank also Prime Minister Mitchell for his excellent chairmanship at the beginning of the Caribbean chairmanship, and we're enjoying working with you and also Ambassador Friday as over the next couple of years, or the next year and a half. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Doreen Kabuka-Masoki. I'm the Small States Coordinator and the task team leader for this exercise. Before I start, may I also just mention that we've gone through a number of consultations, intensive consultations at the country level, and also benefited from a number of fora, which has enabled us to really consult with a number of clients across Africa, the Pacific, and the Caribbean. So this is a product of a number of intense consultations also with our small states advisory group, many of whom are in the room today. So this PowerPoint, what it will show you is really an overview of the World Bank Group engagement, why we're here, how we got here, and how we've lifted the corporate agenda for small states over the last year or so. So as you know, small states is 1.5 million in terms of population. That's the definition. We have small states across all regions. Some states are more than 1.5 million, as you know. The majority are actually in Latin America and East Asia and the Pacific. Some are landlocked, some are coastal, and some are mostly are island. In terms of overview of World Bank engagement, how did we get here? As you know, over the last number of years, there have been a number of very important international conferences that have really highlighted the importance of small states, the universal development challenges, but also specific challenges for small states. In 2015, the World Bank responded. We had a small states forum in Lima. At that particular forum, members, many of you who are in the room today, endorsed the 7 priority actions. We also committed to a stock-taking report. That stock-taking report was launched in 2016. That stock-taking report was backward-looking. That helped us really highlight what the bank has been doing over the last number of years. And we realized through that process, we've actually been doing a lot of work with small states. What the roadmap does going forward, it enables us to look at how we're engaging and how we continue to engage with small states going forward. What's very important with this roadmap is that we've also anchored it within the World Bank strategy. We've anchored it within the forward look, and how the forward look is looking at reaching client segments, including small states. So those 7 priority action areas that I have referred to are here. Many of you know these 7 priority actions, so I'm not going to go deeply into each one for the sake of time. But what these 7 priority actions have done for us is really, they've created a backbone or pillars for our roadmap, and has enabled the World Bank Group to kind of ask ourselves questions about how we want to move forward in terms of inclusion of vulnerability. As you heard the Prime Minister mentioning, as you heard Hart mentioning, the inclusion of vulnerability as a decision criterion for concessional financing. Very important for high-income countries, indebted countries, for example, in the Caribbean. Predictability of affordable financing through IDA. Debt sustainability. What is the bank doing forward on going to be doing going forward on debt sustainability? What will the bank be doing going forward in terms of access to new and existing climate financing? What will the bank be doing going forward in terms of capacity building, absorptive capacity, increased IDA resources? Very important how countries are going to be absorbing those extra resources. Diversification. Small island states, but also landlocked states, diversification and intensification, access to financial markets, as the Prime Minister mentioned, de-risking, extremely important. So these are all highlighted in the roadmap, and has created a very nice sort of pillars and backbone to the roadmap. What we did Going forward, we had, as the Prime Minister mentioned, we had discussions in Grenada together with the ambassador. And we had intensive consultations going forward about those 7 priority actions. And what we came up with was 3 main focus areas, right? As Hart mentioned in his presentation, these are 3 buckets, if you like, that have really helped us to focus and home in on some of the areas that are important for small states. So first of all, enhancing concessional financing, addressing small states' vulnerability issues. Secondly, attracting private sector financing. We had an ED seminar where issues of supporting diversification and promoting resilience came up. This was just 10 days ago. Diversification and also intensification. Building client capacity. This is more internal in terms of how our World Bank policies, procedures, and frameworks being employed to help us to improve and build client capacity. So the first one, enhancing concessional financing to address small states' vulnerability. Many of these areas are actually already being done or are in process. For example, which Lisa can talk into, is the enhancing small states' concessional financing through IDA. There's been a big increase by 190%. Clarifying vulnerability metrics. My colleague Naresh Duraswamy is here in the room, and we'll be working together as the Small States Secretariat, together with some of our partners who are also in the room, to create a list of vulnerabilities matrix that hopefully can inform the IDA 19 negotiations. Facilitating access to concessional climate financing. We have our director, James Close, in the room, who would be able to talk into some of the ways that the World Bank Group is developing a programmatic approach to climate financing, but also blended financing, right, in terms of disaster risk management and climate. So moving on to attracting private sector financing. Here we have 6 important areas that are very connected, but what we're trying to show you here is how are we enhancing efforts for debt sustainability? How are we facilitating through the IFC and MEGA private sector-led development? We have IFC in the room, and we also have MEGA in the room. We can talk into some of that during the discussion. Mobilizing commercial finance, again. De-risking, as has been mentioned. Vulnerability, enhancing connectivity. Very important for all small states, but specifically also for our very remote Pacific small islands that need to be looking at enhancing connectivity given their remoteness. Moving on to client capacity, we have here a slide that basically shows how our World Bank policies, procedures, and frameworks, such as our new procurement framework, safeguards, bank instruments, partnerships, South-South learning, helping to build client capacity. We have had a massive PPF, which is a project preparation facility increase commitment of 750 million, which again, Lisa should be able to talk into that. We have a number of our members of the advisory group in the room who can talk into safeguards and procurement. But we're also, as Hart mentioned, really enhancing partnerships. We're working together with the OECD, with UNDP, with a number of UN agencies, and we also are promoting South-South learning through the Small States Forum. We spoke yesterday at length with the Prime Minister about how we can increase knowledge exchange as we strengthen the Small States Forum into a platform. So we've talked about those 3 areas, right? We've talked about concessional financing, private financing, building client capacity, but there are constraints. There are incentive constraints, there are budget constraints. In the next slide, what we highlight here is that, look, all of this needs to be anchored in the W process, right, which is our rolling strategic budget planning framework. Anything that we're doing in terms of small states need to be aligned with priorities of the World Bank and resources. We need to create better incentives for small states, for staff working in small states, and we need to, within our limited administrative budgets, be able to develop some of those innovative and operational solutions that the Prime Minister alluded to. So moving forward, we had an ED seminar on April 10th. I will not go into each and every one of those issues because we do have a one-pager at the back of the room for you, which goes into more depth some of the issues and the feedback that we received at the Executive Director's seminar. But some of those areas are very important and will guide some of the discussions going forward today. What we have in the roadmap going forward is a matrix of commitments. This matrix of commitments really shows us specific actions under each priority area, under the 7 priority areas. In the roadmap, which is at the back of the room, is on page 24 to 27, you'll find a much more developed matrix. What is important is that we've highlighted targets, we've benchmarked those targets, and we have commitments from around the bank, right? It's a matrix of commitments. We have consulted with our GPs. So for each of those areas, what we did for the sake of this PowerPoint is we just highlighted a few of them for you. So for example, inclusion of vulnerability, it's a commitment on our side. We're going to be working with our partners on that. Debt sustainability, we have Abba Prasad in the room who can talk into some of the work that we're going to be doing in terms of conducting training. Diversification of small states. We have a number of colleagues in the room who are from our environment GP who can talk into how we're going to be investing in the blue economy. De-risking, we have IMF in the room who can also talk into some of those areas. So that's a very sort of quick outline in terms of where we are with the draft roadmap. As I said, we've gone through a number of consultations over the last couple of months. We're looking forward to revisiting and revising the document post these discussions, and we really look forward to continuing working with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm back. Again, for those of you that might have just joined or came in a little bit late, my name's Christine Hogan, and I'm the Executive Director for the Caribbean, for Canada and Ireland. And it's great to be here, and I have the lovely pleasure of serving as the moderator for the next 45 minutes or so before we'll have a little bit of a chance to mingle, network over a cocktail. We've got some additional panelists, and I want to thank Doreen and Hart, and especially Prime Minister Mitchell for laying out a very compelling vision, but also a challenge to all of us with a number of very concrete and specific ideas. And I know that Prime Minister Mitchell is very much anxious for this to be as interactive and more conversational and to see what momentum we can build and a number of important markers as we move to the annual meeting later this fall. But let me give our other panelists, and welcome, Minister, lovely to have you here, to the other panelists who are up here from the UN, representing the landlocked states. Heidi's joined us, Victoria, who's our Vice President for Africa, Minister from Asia Pacific, I'm sorry. I am learning my acronyms. They didn't actually say that. They just, sorry about that. And of course, Lisa Finnerman, who is going to tackle some of the tough questions about how easy it will be to stand up a fast-track facility for small states under IDA. I think that's a great challenge. But maybe we can start with you, Heidi, if you'd like to just offer a few initial reactions, maybe 3 minutes or so, and we'll ask each of the panelists to do the same, and then we'll open it up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, Excellencies. It's a great pleasure to be here and represent the United Nations Office of Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States. We are a very small office, but with a very big mandate. We represent 92 of the most vulnerable countries of the UN, and 40 of them are actually, or about 40, 39 I think is the exact number, are small states. So very many of them. We are a very small office, and I have very good news for all the small states because we just, unfortunately, our High Representative just left, But this last week, the Secretary General has just appointed a new High Representative for our office. And she comes from a very small state. She is a former ambassador of Tonga, current Minister of Tourism, Ms. Fekita Utoikamanu, and she will join our office in early June, we hope, for the Oceans Conference. So this is very good news. So I would like to just say a few words of what we bring to the table. So what is our office doing? Because people don't often know what we do. Our mandate is to advocate for these countries and bring resources for these countries. And how do we do that? We, of course, participate in as many meetings. We travel. We go and see member states, donors, organizations, and we make sure that we articulate why these countries really need to have the focus and why they need the resources and why it is in the interest of all of us to make sure that the special case of the small islands in particular is taken into consideration. So that is one of our things. And we also, there is a program called the Samoa Pathway, which is for the small islands. And within the context of the Samoa Pathway, we are really looking into how to implement partnerships. So we are at the moment the secretariat of a steering committee, UN Steering Committee for Partnerships. And we are working together, bringing private sector in particular. We have just set is what is called the SIDS Global Partnership Network, which is a network that works, and we are bringing together different private sector organizations from small islands and also globally. We work together with National Geographic, many others, Google, Apple, and so on. So bringing in these big together with small, really, and building and forging new partnerships to support the small islands. So that's the other thing that we are also doing. And then we provide support for the countries when they are at the UN negotiating. Our office provides secretarial services for the countries and also provides them with some, as needed, some analysis and so on. And the final thing that we were just tasked to do in support of the small islands is probably the biggest mandate that we have, and that is called, we have been asked to do UN-wide coherence at global, regional, and national level. And that is a very big mandate for a small office. So we are doing global advocacy for the most. We are not like, I can see the leadership from UNDP, they are working on the ground. We are not. We are really the global advocacy organization to support the small islands and make sure that we do our best to make that everybody comes together, and we can forge these partnerships for the small islands. And I have to say that this IDA 18 is a very exciting development and a real opportunity to move forward, in particular as we are looking into the implementation of the SDGs, which we are all working on.
Okay, great, thank you. So maybe I'll turn to you, Victoria, and you can give us a little bit of your perspective inside the bank from the East Asia and Pacific. Now I've corrected myself.
Yes.
In terms of particularly how you see the roadmap, the level of ambition, the way forward.
Okay.
I think if you just hold it, it should.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellencies, Prime Ministers, Honorable Ministers, Executive Directors, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to participate in the Small States Forum. And my colleague Hart said at the beginning, small states, large crowds, strong interest. And I'd like to add to that, small states, big ideas, bold visions. Prime Minister, this is exactly how I saw your speech and the proposals that you've put on the table. I think it's really inspiring, it's bold, ambitious, and I think all of us, or at least I'm excited by it and look forward to working with you and others in the room to make it happen, particularly in our countries in the Pacific. Indeed, you did mention the Pacific Possible Report, which is very much aligned to what you're talking about in your proposal. It is possible, and we see the glass half full, not half empty. And so, this analysis that we did looked at specific areas where the Pacific Islands could really stand on to move their economies and their societies forward. And so we were at a good position, starting with IDA 18 implementation, to be able to really support our countries to make a transformational difference. So let me say just a few words about how we're approaching the IDA 18 delivery. Just in terms of the roadmap, I think it touches on the right issues. I think it moves us all in the right direction and it addresses the right questions. I think the real issue is how we're all going to get to this. But coming back to how we're preparing to deliver IDA 18 in the Pacific, the IDA 18 takes Pacific Island countries who benefit from IDA, their allocation in total from about 390 million in IDA 17 to 600 million. Sorry, 900 million in IDA 18. So that is over 2 times, almost 3 times what we had. Now, so it calls for doing things somewhat differently. As the Prime Minister said, it can't be business as usual. And so we're taking this very much to heart. We're trying to be much more strategic than we've been in the past, based on some of the analysis that we've done in the Pacific Possible Report. And then there are a couple of additional principles that are guiding how we're working with our clients in IDA 18. First is greater selectivity. We realize that with so much money in some of the countries, the allocations implies increases 4 times or 3 times. The tendency would be to rush and try and do everything. We can't do everything. We can't be fragmented. So what are the few key things that we can do and do well and make a transformational difference? So being really selective, focusing on some of the areas that come out of the Pacific Possible Report. Second, to make sure that we're more ready to work on the projects. When projects are approved, that they're in a greater state of readiness, and that we focus also much more on implementation and implementation support. So how are we going to do this? We're going to really use project preparation advances, take a little bit of the money that for the project, take it upfront, use it to really make sure projects are prepared well, increase our field presence. We're making Fiji a sub-regional hub for the Pacific, the South Pacific, put more colleagues in Fiji. We're also going to put some more colleagues in the Federated States of Micronesia for the North Pacific, really give hands-on implementation support day in, day out to our client countries, and do it in a way that builds their capacity. Streamline our procedures to suit the particular circumstances of our small states. As you know, the bank is doing an agile pilot. Prime Minister, we also want to be more agile, perhaps not as agile as the small states, but we will try, so do some more streamlining of procedures so that it's easier for our client countries. We're going to use more regional approaches. We've been using them over the past several years. We have regional platforms for fisheries, for maritime work, for ICT, for aviation, for resilience. We're going to use the regional approach for several of the reasons that you mentioned, build on that and do more in that space. And partnerships, as was mentioned again. We have to pull together. We can't do it alone. We can't, tax our client governments more by being so disorganized. So we're going to pull together with regional institutions, regional bodies. We're not in competition with them. We're working side by side and with them and supporting them. We're working closer with the ADB using similar procedures as we use to support Fiji. We're going to do more of that work with other development partners, Australia, New Zealand, that are very present in the region. So, and then work more closely as a One World Bank group, particularly to talk about the issues of how to bring private sector resources to the Pacific. So let me stop here, but very excited about the next 3 years.
Great, thanks, Victoria. Maybe now I can call on Minister Syed Kam to give a bit of a perspective from Fiji, and I know you also have some big responsibilities of chairmanship coming up as well, so maybe you can speak a little about that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can you,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. In fact, the Vice President stole most of my speech. I think it would be amiss of me not to mention climate change, given the fact that Fiji has been given the honor of being the president for incoming COP23, very generously hosted by Germany. But I think for us, at least in the Pacific and many other smaller island states, you would see climate change and, in fact, climate finance being synonymous with development finance. Because at the end of the day, I think the ability to segregate those is actually quite artificial, because your development is very much affected by the ravages of climate change. And of course, the irony of being that most of the small states have almost negligible levels of carbon footprint, yet they are the cold face of climate change. And I think for us that is very, very important. But as part of the presidency, one of the things that we are looking at as part of our theme is adaptation finance. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the global finance that has been committed or has been pledged, the $100 billion, 80% of that is towards mitigation and 20% is only towards adaptation. Now for most small states, at least I can speak for the Pacific and I'm sure other states too, that the focus is more on adaptation as opposed to mitigation. And how do we actually then change the permutation? So our focus of the presidency would be to not necessarily increase the pool of funds that's available, but to actually change the permutation. Mm-hmm. At the moment it's 80-20, it'd be good to get 75-25. The other trick, of course, is to be able to get private sector interest in adaptation. Currently there's a lot of innovation, ingenuity, a lot of creativity in respect of mitigation, new technology, but for adaptation there's very little. Little emphasis on it, little focus on it, little interest in it, and also in respect of the financial models that may be available in terms of bonds perhaps specific to adaptation. I think that's very, very critical, because essentially what happens for adaptation, you find it puts a lot of heavy pressure on public finances. Mitigation is a lot more opportunities. The other point, of course, being is that I've got a whole list of things that are in my head, so I'll just sort of blurt them all out, maybe we can discuss it later. I think the other point, of course, is that, as the Honourable Prime Minister highlighted, that not all small states are either recipients. So it brings us to the point of vulnerability. So our argument is that the vulnerability, the measurements, the indices needs to be a lot more nuanced. So you may have actually small states that may be actually middle income, but they may not necessarily be vulnerable for the purposes of being permanently in that box, but could actually fall into that box following the triggering of certain events. Mm-hmm. And I think that's is very critical to understand and appreciate. We had, before I close off, we had the second strongest storm ever recorded to hit landfall last year in Fiji, and it killed 44 Fijians. It wiped off a third of the value of our GDP. Destroyed schools and hospitals and villages, etc. But the point of the matter is that it did not destroy our tourism areas, nor did it affect our manufacturing areas. If it had, then, you could have, we would have gone back another 50 years, let alone meet our SDG requirements by 2030. So I think, thankfully we didn't, but hopefully we won't get another cyclone next year that, put us in that trap. So this is the issue, and I think the last point I'd like to make is that the point about resilience, I think, is very critical, because we had 6,000 kilometers of electrical cables that went down after Cyclone Winston that hit us last year. We put them all back up. If you get another cyclone, it may go down again. So the issue is about building back better, and how do we do it? And obviously there's a price tag to it, and this is where we need to be able to develop partnerships with private sector, and we look to various agencies for obviously helping us develop that. Because generally, as we've had various bilateral meetings over the past few days, you find that many of the bigger companies from bigger countries do not necessarily look at smaller states as investment destinations for those purposes. Thank you.
That's excellent. Very, very rich set of comments there. Lisa, we'll call on you kind of as the last in the formal panel here to, we heard a lot of discussion. First of all, I think most people would be want to say a personal thank you to you for your personal efforts on the IDA 18 replenishment. We all know how many people were beavering around in the background, but I know what a leadership role you played, so just a special note on that. And I know also how eager people are to hear about the implementation of IDA 18. Have a lot of expectations built up for what it's going to achieve. So maybe you can share in a very brief intervention how things are tracking on that.
Sure, thank you, Christine. It's really an honour to be here today to talk to you all and tell you about IDA 18, which we are very happy about. The unique challenges of the small states have always been a priority for IDA, and in the last cycles, IDA 16 and 17, we did increase our financing through increasing base allocations and also with access to the crisis response window and the regional window by small states. In IDA 18, we've been able to significantly increase the resources available. It's been mentioned we have 50% more. This is primarily because of the strong ongoing support of the contributors to IDA, as well as a financial innovation. It's the biggest change in the IDA financing structure since IDA's inception. We got a AAA rating for IDA, and we'll be going to capital markets. So with this 50% increase in IDA, we've been able to do a lot more. And the small states really are the grouping of countries that are benefiting most from this. So you saw in the slides earlier the financing from the core country allocations to the IDA small states will approximately triple. We're achieving this primarily by increasing the minimum base allocations. In IDA 17, the allocation was SDR $4 million per annum, and we're bringing that up to 15 million SDR per annum is the minimum allocation for any country. The allocations across the countries themselves vary. That tripling number is an aggregate number. Across the different countries, the increases are approximately just less than double to more than quadruple. And Victoria talked about the increases in EAP, and also in Latin America, Caribbean, and in Africa. You'll see very significant increases there. So they are just actually the core allocations of what we call the performance-based allocation, this formula that IDA has for allocating to countries. But we have about a third of our 75 billion replenishment is actually also in other windows that the small states can access. So in those, we have the regional window, which has been, I think, very beneficial to many small states in IDA 17. That's going to increase from $3 billion to $5 billion. And there is a benefit for the small states because other countries have to provide a third of national resources to match with the 2/3 from the regional window, whereas small states have higher leverage of regional resources. They have to contribute 20% of their national allocations. And we've also made another change under the regional window for countries that are moderate risk of debt distress. In IDA 17, regional window resources were 100% credits on IDA terms, but for IDA 18 there'll be 50% grants and 50% credits. In the crisis response window, that is growing as well, and that has been very beneficial to IDA small states facing severe shocks and natural disasters. And this time around, instead of $2 billion, we'll have $3 billion, And there's also been a change for states where the shocks are so large that they could wipe out more than 30% of GDP. We will then be able to look to see if the debt sustainability of the country is affected by the shock, and if it is, we can change the terms. So a country that was moderate risk of debt distress before the shock, if it becomes red light, high risk of debt distress, it will then get all grants, not just on the allocation from the crisis response window, but from on all the rest of its IDA financing for that year. We also have another totally new window which we're very excited to explore, and this goes very much to what the Prime Minister was talking about on private sector leveraging. So how do we really bring the resources in to grow economies in the private sector, and how do we de-risk? So we'll have a 2.5 billion window in IDA 17, which will allow IFC and MEGA to invest in projects that would previously have been too risky for them, and IDA will de-risk those projects. So a couple more changes that benefit small states. We had previously had very concessional financing terms for small island states, longer maturities than we give even our poorest countries. And in IDA 18, we're able to extend those to all small states, not just the small island states. We will now be offering in IDA what we call the catastrophe deferred drawdown option, which is a tool to allow financing to a country so that if a catastrophe hits, there can be an immediate payout on that tool. So this is the first time this is available to IDA. So overall, I feel like I'm talking too much, but there's so many wonderful, I think, new things in IDA 18 that I want to make sure you all know about them. Keep going. Well, I was delighted to hear the Prime Minister calling on you all to bring those projects, because that's really what we have to do now. This is huge additional amounts of money. And the midterm review that we referred to is the point just at the ahead of the next replenishment cycle, when we report on the progress on this cycle. So we need to show by then that the money that we're providing is being put to really good use and is really needed. Because in order to have a good dynamic for the next replenishment, the contributors like to see that their money is being used. If it's not being used, then maybe we don't need it as much. So I really encourage you all to look and come with the projects, what you really want to do that you haven't been able to do before. Bring those strategic projects to us now. For capacity building, we will have this significant ramp up in the money we have available to help build client capacity and the pipeline. That's now $750 million. Through our regional window, we also provide grants to regional organizations that can be used for regional collaboration and capacity building. So you may want to explore with your bank counterparts whether you might be able to use the regional window for that effect. So with that, I think I'll conclude there. And thank you very much. There were so many of you in this room who really worked to get a great IDA 18 outcome. So we look forward to working with you on the implementation.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. That's, I think, it's just a very sort of treetop overview of some of the new offerings under IDA, and we're, I think, all collectively feeling very positive about a number of the more innovative dimensions of what we're doing. We're going to open it up now, but I'm going to warn a couple of people that I'm going to call on you, because I haven't heard too many people talk about IFC, for example. I haven't heard anybody talk so much about the broader Caribbean, and I know we have a representative from our country team. We also have the OECD, I know, is here, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and some other representatives from the UN. But I thought I would take advantage of the fact that we have another head of government, Prime Minister Chastanet, who is here, and give him the right of first refusal on a comment or a question to our panel. So please, Prime Minister. And there's microphones.
Thank you very much. And we just want to acknowledge Prime Minister Keith Mitchell, and I want to thank him for his leadership in the region. And if I could just give one example of something pretty innovative, something simple but pretty innovative that he recently did, is that in his debt refinancing put a conditionality in that if in fact there is a natural disaster, that the debt would be held in abatement until there is some form of recovery, so that the situation that is faced by smaller states is not as acute as it has been in the past. And again, I think it's this kind of practical things that we need to start focusing on, which is what I took from your presentation. I also want to say that I agree wholeheartedly with the minister from Fiji, that for the smaller states, it really is about adaptation. And to put it more specifically, that we find ourselves right now having to rebuild existing infrastructure to be able to cope with the new reality. We're making investments in which most cases right now, the money is having to be borrowed, which means that we're not getting any capacity increase. So the bridge that we're fixing is carrying the same number of cars. The roads that we're fixing are carrying the same number of cars from before. Which means that we're now going further into debt without any really big changes in improving our competitiveness. All we're dealing with is just sustainability. And I want to add that what he said about the $100 billion is 100% correct. So we've not gotten confirmation that we're getting $100 billion. We've not gotten any confirmation as to whether we're going to be able to, and how we're going to draw down on it. So I want to add two caveats. I think that I would like to see, in order to meet the request by the Prime Minister Mitchell, which is immediacy, is that developed countries which have agreed to put in 0.7% of their GDP be allowed to get a credit of 2 to 1 for monies that they put into SIDS for climate change adaptation projects. And the reason for that is because the larger countries are having a difficulty justifying giving aid money to us because of the size. So what is happening is the administration of that project is taking too large of a chunk, and therefore it's not meeting their own compliance requirements. So if we give them a credit of 2 to 1, it may help in making that easier. And I think that there are a lot of donor countries out there that the benefit of their benevolence is being lost because a lot of that money is being channeled through regional entities. The second one is that for the purpose of adaptation and infrastructure specifically, that middle income SIDS be allowed to be reclassified as lesser developed countries to be able to get access to concessional funds. I make this point because both of those mechanisms exist today. The money is there, and how we draw down is there. It really is just a policy position that would require the change. And I'm really hoping that, Prime Minister, in your new capacity, that when we come to the meetings in the fall, that we can really put that on the table to see if we can get some movement. And I'm also going to request from Fiji that at the next COP meeting, that maybe the SIDS can make that kind of plea, because I don't think that we have the time to wait. Because every day another storm comes, and because our infrastructure isn't capable of handling it, we're finding ourselves deeper and deeper in the hole. The last point I want to make is that the real success for us is competitiveness. Because of the smallness of our economies and economies of scales, which is real, so the cost of bringing containers, the cost of getting airlift, the cost of electricity, substantially higher, it means that we need to be much more innovative in how we build our businesses to be competitive. And that is really where it needs to start. And I find that sometimes the macro policies that are being recommended to us stifle out the few investment sectors that we have. So in our region, tourism, which is the mainstay, we're not seeing the requisite policy to support the growth of tourism. It's almost like tourism is a bad word, and that it's rich people that are involved. But when you look at tourism as an industry, it checks more boxes for a developing country than any other sector. Foreign exchange, it is highly intensive in employment, very diversified, and has a huge opportunity to be able to reach into our economies. Yet, we're not seeing, financial resources being made available to de-risk the sector, which is already very, very competitive. So I just want to leave those notes, and I just want to say how pleased I am to see that we're moving in this direction. And I want to support Prime Minister Mitchell to say that the rest of us have to get our act together as SIDS. And it reminds me of a story I heard in 1984 where they were at a Commonwealth Finance Ministers meeting, and everybody was going around the table lamenting how bad structural adjustment was and how bad their economies were. And it was a Minister of Finance who stood up and he said, Einstein once said that matter is not created nor destroyed. And he said, money is the same way. The difference is you have winners and you have losers. And let's try to focus on how we can become more winners. And I want to say that I really take up seriously the challenge by Prime Minister Mitchell, that's what we need to do. We need to be winners, and we can do it. And I want to thank the bank and everybody for the support they've been giving us, and Mr. Mitchell for your leadership in this forum.
Terrific. Thank you very, very much. Excellent. Okay, so now's a chance to kind of hear from a few more people on the floor, and people are welcome to go to the microphone. Is that what you were encouraging me to do? The OECD, yes, I was just going to say that. Because, we're ready to hear from the OECD now. So this is, if you'd introduce yourself as well and welcome your comments.
And then comment with Secretary.
Yeah.
My name is, I'm Jorge Moreira da Silva. I'm the Director of Development Cooperation Directorate at OECD. I'd like to, first of all, to congratulate Prime Minister Mitchell for his leadership. We had the chance to meet a few weeks ago in Paris, and also to congratulate the bank for organizing this important conference. I would like to make only 2 points because we have to be brief. First, we have to make the case for concessional finance based on vulnerability. As you know, OECD is the custodian of ODA, and we released the new ODA figures last week. So we are aware of the importance of concessional finance to address vulnerability. We have worked with the bank on an important report on climate, natural disaster, climate and natural disaster resilience finance. We are aware of the importance not only to have a better access to concessional finance, but also to have a better concessional finance. The report confirms that we have to address two key elements. One is dependence. Most seats are dependent from one single provider, one single donor, one single source. And the second problem is fragmentation. 86% of the projects are below $1.5 million. So it's not only important to address the concessional finance in terms of access, but also to have a better answer in terms of comprehensiveness and also on effectiveness. And I would like to echo the message that was already delivered on the catalytic effect of ODA to leverage the private sector investment. The second message is about what can we do collectively to endorse this idea of the funds of funds and the roadmap. And I'd like to say on behalf of OECD that we are ready to step in and to support, to work with you, with all of you, on this agenda. We are ready to work based on the analytic work that we have developed on climate finance tracking, on development finance, on as well on this agenda on ODA modernization, all the analytic elements of the 2030 agenda, but also based on our convening role. The DAC, the Development Assistance Committee, is the place where the donors sit and the donors discuss and the donors decide the way that they want to step in and move this agenda forward. So it's very important to have the DAC align with this agenda to boost the concessional finance to small states. And we are ready to work not only on the analytical part of this work, but also supporting you convening the dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jorge. Now I understand representative also from the Commonwealth Secretariat, who I also understand is, well, I know for a fact has been very active on the vulnerability issue and part of a very important partnership working on those issues. Please.
Thank you very much. First, let me once again thank Prime Minister Mitchell for taking the lead on the small states program at the World Bank. The Commonwealth, of course, is very appreciative, and I think the fact that vulnerability is being put at the center stage of looking at access to finance, and we have been working with the other partners in this area in looking at how do we come up with a vulnerability indicator which can be mainstreamed across the institutions in terms of looking at how do we distribute ODA. But I would like to probably make a point related to what the minister from Fiji highlighted, which is the issue of climate financing and how do we recognize climate finance. One of the issues that we have recognized in our work at the Commonwealth Secretariat is that there are significant capacity constraints associated with actually accessing the available resources. And I think it's an issue which probably we need to look at critically in terms of how do we deal with this critical issue of adaptation and providing sufficient resources for small states in terms of dealing with the critical issue of the impact of climate change. And the Commonwealth Secretariat has done some work in that area and are trying to look at ways to increase the capacity of the states to better able to access resources. Once again, we think that working on small states has been something which the Commonwealth has had a long tradition in, and we're very happy to see that this has gained international attention, and we have this type of event today which seeks to draw attention, and also all the positive steps which I think led by the World Bank in terms of actually implementing practical measures to assist small states in overcoming the numerous challenges which they face.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of comments about private sector, crowding in private sector, and Lisa talked a little bit about the new window. But I wonder, we have a representative here from the IFC, if you wouldn't mind making a couple of very quick, short comments about how the IFC is looking at the roadmap.
Sure, certainly. I'm Eduardo Valentin. I'm Senior Manager at IFC. Two quick points, one on the past, the other one on the future. On the past, since 2010, we've financed up to about 60 projects in 26 of the 34 eligible countries of the Small States Forum for a total of about $1.2 billion. If we apply the multiplier that we usually do for most projects, we're talking about total project size of $3 to $4 billion. Going forward, we have 5 platforms, 3 existing, 2 new, that will allow us to substantially increase that in small states. The most important that has been active now is a climate finance platform, for which I want to thank Canada for their leadership and strong contribution. That's all countries that are IFC members can access that platform. So that has been the most active up till now. Another one is focused on SME financing, which is mostly for either countries, and that's supported very strongly by the UK and the Netherlands. So I want to thank those 2 nations as well. The third one that we have is focused on agribusiness and agriculture, and it's focused only on either only countries. A fourth one, that just started and was approved recently is an envelope that our management has approved for FCS countries only. And this is not concessional, but it's money that we're willing to put for under higher risk considerations for projects in such situations. And that will give us a leverage of probably up to $2-3 billion of projects in the next 2 or 3 years eventually. And the fourth one is the one that was quoted before. I won't expand on that, which is a private sector window that's approved recently within the IDA 18, and it's eligible for lower income countries of IDA, not all of the IDA countries, and not all the small states. That's something that we're aware of, but hopefully in the IDA 19 will increase.
Great, thank you very much. We have a little bit of time. I don't know if we had encouraged somebody from the IMF to join us and whether there's any comment. The issue of de-risking, correspondent banking, some of those bigger financial issues have come up. I wonder if you'd be open to commenting.
Thanks very much. My name is Peter Allam. I'm an assistant director in the IMF. Yes, Prime Minister Mitchell raised the issue of de-risking or loss of correspondent banking relationships. It was also identified by Doreen as one of the 7 priority areas that the bank's planning to work on. The fund has been working very closely with the bank over the past year, as well as with the Financial Stability Board, to better understand the situation in your countries. And in fact, we compiled a paper which was discussed by our executive board last Friday. For those of you who want to give a fairly succinct document to your colleagues or to your staff, I would recommend this. It's available now on our website. It's got some good news and it's got some bad news. Basically, on the good news front, although you see a decline in the number of banks offering correspondent relationships, this doesn't seem to have stopped the overall volume or the value of transactions through these relationships. And so the story is that although some individual banks are suffering stress from the loss of correspondent banking relationship, financial systems have found ways of working around that by finding other sources of relationships. And so at a macro level, we're not yet seeing a dire impact, or at least not in the small states community. A few countries are suffering severe impacts, but not, again, I say small states. On the downside, the bad news is that fewer banks are now offering these relationships for the same volume. So you're seeing smaller number of banks dominating the market, and you're going to see a loss of competitiveness going forwards, possibly fewer financial services offered, costs will go up for transactions. That's going to be difficult for your development going forwards. Our policy paper identifies a number of ways of addressing this. I won't go into them here because they're a broad range. Some can be addressed nationally, some regionally, and some only with the banking counterparts. But again, I suggest you look at the paper. It's very good on these points. I'd last finish up by saying that in the recent meetings, one of your members has offered to host an international conference on loss of correspondent banking relationships, and our management has agreed to attend. I won't name the country because I don't know if it's been made public yet, but we look forward to discussing these issues with you in the coming months. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to put our panelists on notice that we're going to take one more comment from someone, and then I'm going to come back to you and see if you would take them. Okay. I have a lot of assistant moderators here today. We're going to come back, and maybe each of you could offer a final thought, and taking up Prime Minister Mitchell's challenge to make it as action-oriented as possible, thinking already ahead to the next annual meeting in the fall and to 2018. So if you can gather your thoughts on that. We're very pleased that Seychelles is here as well, and have to really a note of thanks for the momentum that you've created that have got us to this point, and wonder if you had any comments or reflections to quickly offer.
Yeah. Thank you so much. May I take this opportunity to congratulate and commend His Excellency Prime Minister Mitchell for taking up the chairmanship of the Small States Forum. I can certainly feel the dynamism in your tone of speech. Certainly, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Coming from a small state, I think we have so many things in common. First of all is that we are not small people. We've got different size, but our intellectual capacities knows no borders. And secondly, my main purpose of taking the mic this afternoon is to be able to talk about de-risking. I think this is a nightmare for so many of our small states here because of loss of correspondence banking is certainly putting our economies at risk. And we tend to, if this prolongs further, most economies in the small states and other regions faces economic collapse. The questions that I ask myself, is the World Bank, IMF, or any international institution ready to help countries that have collapsed economically? I don't think so. I will leave it to the IMF and the World Bank to decide. But nevertheless, having raised this question, I would like to also offer solutions. The solutions is that IMF and the World Bank, you've got convening power, so jointly together, we certainly depend on you to push this agenda forward, bring all these international banks which are certainly ignoring the small states. The small states in terms of smallness, of course we have small transaction. That's fine. Are we eliminating all small transactions? I don't think so. His Excellency Prime Minister, you ask a very profound questions. How can the World Bank Group help small states? And I think with this kind of questions, I would like to see actions, but IMF and World Bank. The talk is over because the more and more we talk about collecting data, the more and more our countries are certainly being put at risk. And how do I explain the ordinary man in the street coming from his bank? Say, Honorable Minister, can you tell me why is my bank not paying $400? I have no answer. And to be quite honest with you, distinguished panel, and all the distinguished crowd, it gives me sleepless nights, quite many nights, you know. And of course, I'm really concerned by that. And I'm sure, as the gentleman who has mentioned from IMF, that one of the countries has promised to hold an international conference, I will not certainly hide from this fact. It's the Republic of Seychelles. So you are all welcome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to ask whether we have time for any more comment before we go back to the panel. Doreen is my captain here, so what is our sense? I know cocktails are waiting, and there's no doubt a vigorous conversation that we can all share during the reception. So maybe there's one gentleman right here who has his hand and has put his up. Maybe we'll take that one comment, and then I'll come back to the panel. And I apologize in advance for everybody that wanted to jump in, but we didn't get to.
Merci. Je vais m'exercer en français pour ici remercier au nom de vraiment de Djibouti. On n'a pas été beaucoup actifs dans les small states. Certains d'entre vous pensent que Djibouti est un grand pays peut-être. On est en Afrique de l'Est, sur la corne de l'Afrique. Et on est à l'intersection entre le Moyen-Orient et l'Afrique. Nous sommes sur 23 000 km², pardon, avec moins de 1 million de population. Mais on fait beaucoup la une peut-être dans le monde pour une simple raison, c'est que nous sommes dans ce qu'on appelle one of the three shock points, global shock points. C'est-à-dire sur le Bab el-Mandeb, 20 km nous séparent entre le Moyen-Orient et l'Afrique. Et bien sûr, on trouve beaucoup de bases militaires sur la République de Djibouti, y compris les États-Unis. Moi, je voulais, au-delà de la présentation de Djibouti, attirer l'attention sur les différents petits pays qui existent, parce que comme il y a plusieurs Afriques, il y a plusieurs petits pays, small states. Should I shift in English maybe? Yeah? Ça va? Le Premier ministre me comprend? Je voulais ici remercier, je disais, la Banque mondiale vraiment pour l'effort dans AIDA 18 avec toutes les innovations qui viennent d'intervenir dans le AIDA 18. Djibouti, comme tous les petits pays, vont bénéficier. Je voulais également ici féliciter le Premier ministre Michel pour son speech, ou en tout cas son intervention qui était très pertinente, parce que nous vivons à peu près les mêmes conditions sans avoir eu l'occasion de participer beaucoup à ce type de forum. Vraiment, on a le même phénomène que nous subissons également dans cette partie d'Afrique, en tout cas pour Djibouti. Le problème de défis climatiques se pose de façon extrêmement pertinente. Une fois, lors d'une conférence à Sendai, au Japon, j'avais parlé, Hart était là, que nous étions, en 2012, c'était en permanente une tsunami permanente. tous les 3 ans, il n'y a pas 2 ans ou 3 ans où des crises humanitaires ou climatiques n'interviennent dans cette partie du monde, en Afrique. Et Djibouti se trouvant dans cette région très instable avec la guerre au Yémen, toutes les difficultés que nous avons avec l'Érythrée, la Somalie qui a été sans État, sans rien pendant 20 ans, Dieu merci, il commence à reprendre. On avait l'instabilité de l'Éthiopie avec les différentes guerres sociales, civiles, et tout ça venait sur Djibouti depuis l'indépendance, qui est 40 ans maintenant. Et donc, on a à gérer tous ces problèmes. Pendant que nous sommes en train de gérer ces problèmes, on a besoin de nourrir beaucoup de Djiboutiens qui sont en train de connaître une croissance démographique assez rapide, y compris par l'immigration. Donc, on a fait en sorte à ce que nous puissions accélérer pour qu'il y ait une transformation. Qu'est-ce qui se présente quand la taille de l'économie est aussi petite que vous avez besoin de développer certaines infrastructures? Lesquelles infrastructures peuvent être détruites à cause de l'inondation parce que la sécheresse étant très permanente, une fois qu'il y a une pluie, c'est l'inondation qui va détruire tout ce qui a été construit. 80% du PIB de la République de Djibouti est concentré sur le nid du Noued. Vous imaginez, quand il y a une catastrophe naturelle comme une inondation, c'est 80% du PIB de Djibouti qui disparaît. Donc, quand nous avons face à toutes ces difficultés, de l'autre côté, nous sommes en train de donner beaucoup. Qu'est-ce que nous donnons? C'est le premier pays en Afrique à autoriser par la loi tous les réfugiés à avoir le droit de vivre comme n'importe quel autre Djiboutien, à accéder à l'école et à travailler, à avoir le droit de travailler. En face, nous avons donc cette contribution au niveau international sur la piraterie. Si la piraterie sur le golfe d'Aden a presque disparu, mon collègue de Seychelles va le confirmer parce qu'ils ont également subi jusqu'aux Seychelles, c'est parce que Djibouti a offert toutes ces facilités. À côté de ça, qu'est-ce que nous rencontrons par moment? Au lieu d'avoir des facilités, d'être accompagnés, des contraintes sont posées à ces petits pays que nous sommes. Quel type de contraintes? Le phénomène de de-risking que le Premier ministre a parlé, c'est vraiment, nous considérons ça comme une honte pour les petits pays qui ont déjà suffisamment de problèmes à résoudre quand le peu de choses sur leur commerce, de quoi ils vivaient, est en train d'être mis en danger parce que certaines décisions sont prises quelque part. Nous trouvons ça injuste et des réponses devraient être trouvées. Avec nos amis américains, nous n'avons pas caché aux trésoreries. On nous dit qu'il y a une transaction, je vais finir madame, une transaction du cash parce qu'il n'y a pas suffisamment de technologie et donc toutes les transactions, les banques correspondantes vont arrêter. Et quand nous avons les mêmes bases américaines accueillies, c'est la seule base américaine en Afrique. L'argent arrive en cash pour être distribué aux soldats. Nous disons, alors dans ces cas-là, il y a quelque chose que nous ne comprenons pas. Voilà un peu le double langage. On parle également sur le phénomène de la taille. Je vais finir par ça. L'OCDE va nous empêcher d'accéder à certains pays membres de l'OCDE de prêts concessionnels. Pourquoi? Parce que le PIB par tête d'habitant va aller plutôt vers un pays à revenu intermédiaire. Pourquoi? Quelques investissements divisés par un dénominateur qui est limité, c'est-à-dire par le nombre de populations, ça va très vite. Le PIB, il monte très vite avec même l'investissement du camp, de différents camps des pays amis. Alors que les besoins... Les pays, donc j'ai dit, il faut qu'il y ait certaines questions sur lesquelles on doit apporter des réponses sincères, concrètes, comme la Banque mondiale, sous le leadership du président Kim, ils sont en train d'essayer, en tout cas que nous apprécions beaucoup, par rapport à ces différentes innovations qui sont en train d'arriver, et y compris pour les pays Donc nous souhaitons que certains pays amis, certains partenaires également prennent le pas pour essayer d'apporter quelques solutions dans ces moments très difficiles pour les petits pays. Merci.
Merci beaucoup pour cette intervention. C'est très important d'avoir une perspective africaine. It's very helpful to have the perspective from Djibouti and Africa, and I think that was very, very helpful. I'm not sure, probably could have benefited with a little interpretation for some of our colleagues, but let me first of all thank you all for the thoughtful comments from the floor, and I'm now going to turn it back to our panel. Maybe starting with you, Lisa, if you don't mind going first. Sort of where we go from here, I think is really the critical moment and critical question.
Well, for IDA, where we go from here now is bringing the project. And I meant to also respond to the Prime Minister's call for fast tracking and let you know, normally the IDA rules are that with the allocations that you can front load 30% of your future year's allocations into your first year. But for small states, it's different. You can front load 80% of your full 3-year allocation right up front. So don't hold back. Bring us those projects. And just to also mention, since our friend from Djibouti spoke, I didn't mention it, but we do also have in IDA 18 a special $2 billion window to help countries who are hosting significant numbers of refugees. So if you would like to bring us a project there, you can do that one as well. Thank you.
Okay, and please. Heidi.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll take just the issue of vulnerability and the work. I think the Commonwealth Secretariat was mentioning this is the work that is led by the World Bank, and really trying to think about how to define vulnerability as a criteria for concessional financing. The least developed countries that we are also, many of the small states are also least developed countries, and in order to graduate from the category of being a least developed country, there are 3 criteria. One is the GNI, the other one is a human index and human development index, and the third one is vulnerability. And we've had a situation quite often where there are countries who are about to graduate from LDC category, in particular many island nations, small states, that are reluctant to do so. Usually graduation should be celebrated. It's a great achievement for a country. But countries are reluctant to do so because they are worried that they are just one storm away from going back, and that it is the vulnerability that is a critical issue for them. So we are very much hoping that this work that we are doing together with the lead of the World Bank can provide some further development into, because I hear in this discussion this has been mentioned quite a few times. And then just to say that on the IDA, I hope that we could also bring the partnership steering committee and all of those partners together in thinking about projects and to benefit from the IDA.
Great.
Thank you.
Victoria, can I ask you to just final 60 seconds?
Sure. From the perspective of East Asia and the Pacific, we're really focusing, Prime Minister, on what you said about fast tracking. So we're working with countries to fast track as much as we can. If 80% is available, we'll do it. So we'll put a lot of effort into that. We'll work to increase our presence in the Pacific countries to support our clients to build their capacity. And we'll work with OPCS to streamline procedures so that it's easier for our client countries to access our resources, both in preparation and implementation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Hart, please.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the very productive and useful and insightful contributions. This will actually help us to finalize the roadmap within the next couple of weeks. But it's not only finalizing the roadmaps, it's also, if you look at the final pages, it's several pages of actions that are available, opportunities that are available for small states. And we will be working with our country management units, with our country directors, to make sure that these actions are actually being taken up, are being reflected in the country partnership framework, so that we see projects either being utilized, that we see where where capacity support is needed through our treasury function, through various areas in the bank, that these are actually materialized, and then we can report back to you what is being done where, with what objective, and we can track that and showcase it over the next several meetings that we'll have in the Small States Forum. I would also like to recommit to our efforts to continuously try to have more flexibility, to be more efficient, to reduce the red tape, to make sure that the access to the finance is as simple and straightforward as possible, and that capacity building is integral to the projects. And where we need additional support, we have a number of arrangements with UN agencies to actually help us with the implementation on the ground.
Great. Prime Minister Mitchell, would you like to just offer a few?
Christine, I don't know what else I can say to add to this. I heard some wonderful music here today, and just my view is that we want action. Action. And Lisa, the best music I heard today is from you. And I am ready to dance. So let's go, friends. I thank you all for this wonderful session. Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you very much. They invited me to try to offer a few concluding remarks. I'm not really sure it's necessary, but maybe I will just throw out a few things. First of all, leadership. I think all of us can attest to the fact that the Small States Forum is in wonderful hands, taking over from the fantastic leadership of Seychelles and now to Prime Minister Mitchell, and I think we're all extremely grateful for the commitment that you've made to provide leadership over the coming couple of years. The second message, clearly all client groups, so we talked a lot about IDA, but there was also a lot of conversation about the middle income economies that are in small states, and to not kind of look over that. I think the other big message is partnerships, and the forum today, the session that we had today is a reflection of the many partners who want to cooperate, work with us, play in this space with the World Bank. We're very grateful for your participation and contributions today, and really want to see more and more effective partnerships now focused on the action side of the agenda. Prime Minister Mitchell, you said three things. You said we need to change the narrative. You said that we need to deliver concrete results. And you said that small is not a disadvantage, but a distinct advantage. And I think based on all of the conversations and the inputs today, I think we have a lot of momentum going forward. The narrative is changing to one of action, and I look forward to reconvening in a few months down the road, and good luck to the management of the World Bank in rolling out the roadmap. There's a lot of anticipation. It's great work, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate today, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the introduction.
No, that's okay. You know, I have to introduce the drinks outside on the microphone. Fantastic, thank you.
It's turned off. If people are thirsty, there's drinks outside.